So, if you had to pick the top three things app developers should always include in their apps, to help with their marketing and to help them actually move forward, what would some of those be and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the first thing you want to probably put in there is, especially nowadays, is the social networking implementation. Facebook, Twitter, especially with iOS 6 coming out, that's fully integrated into Facebook. So you want to keep that in mind moving forward, because people want to be, if they like your app, they're going to want to share it. And that is, if they can't share it, then you're kind of just, you're tripping over your own feet at that point.
Yeah, the ability to go viral. Yeah.
Yeah. Second, what I would always include is, the ability to make monetization, or make money at the end of the day, and even if you're not going to use it. So, like sometimes with, if I have a paid app, I'll install RevMob or Chartboost or one of these, SDKs, but I'll put the campaign on pause, and I'll release it as a paid app, so that if I ever want to change it to a free app, I can control the display on a server side. So I can just press play on my dashboard on my website, and this ad starts getting served up so that I can control that. And from a marketing standpoint, it's just like a great way to get your data, to make money on your app, to just kind of keep the process going. And I would definitely recommend that, for anyone, even if you're planning on doing it, 6 months down the road. And the third, I think, would be, this is going to sound, it's a little ambiguous, and this is more for the alpha combat type apps, like the big project type apps. You've got an idea, you build an app, sink a few $1,000s into it, and you have one big app, is to really make sure you have like marketing materials. And what I mean by marketing materials is like, like have the splash screen be a layered PSD file so that you can make banners for it. Or if you want to reach out to a blogger, you can give them assets that they want. Like having the ability to create assets that you can share with people in a customized way, as opposed to like slicing up screenshots for people, is an awesome way to make your app really unique, really special, without a whole lot of extra cost to it. And that's something you can work with a designer when you first build it out.
Presentation is so important.
At that point, like you actually did a really good blog post on how to do those custom screenshots so that they look like they're in the phone and all that stuff. And that was on your blog. I think that was your last blog post, and that was a really good tutorial on that. So
yeah. So what parting advice? Like if we have people that are watching and listening to this and going to be in the future here, who are wanting to be able to get started and get driven in the right way. Maybe they've created their first app or couple of apps. Maybe they've stalled. What parting advice would you give to the newbie appreneur who's just getting started, or one who's just started to roll?
The best advice I would give to someone is to, if it's in a perfect world, the advice I give is learn how to read the code that developers are going to send you. You don't have to be able to write it. Like I can't write code, but if they send you something, you need to be able to like press play in the simulator on Xcode and be able to like test it yourself and look at it and put it on your phone and be able to like do it without them hand-holding it for you. And be able, because what that's going to do is you're going to be able to go back to them and say, look, I want you to include this, and here's where you're going to do it, like in the app. And it's going to give you a really, really great perspective on how to develop these things very quickly and very efficiently. And to that point, even if it's not coding, learn how to do something in the process that you can control and you can own, that you don't have to outsource, and that you can have some, input on. I would say the one thing I would recommend against is sitting back, not knowing anything, not wanting to know anything, and letting a team of 20 guys just kind of hand you what they do and say, hey, good luck,
Yeah, that's not. I just want to say with your code, you don't have to read code, but they should know what tidy code looks like, because if they're getting sloppy code, that is the biggest red flag you can have. I mean, your app may actually not work, and you'll have that final payment delivered. So, know when on the first time you look at their code, if it's not tidy. There's plenty of examples out there. I think I even have a blog article on that. But there's plenty of examples on the net. Google it. Look at good, clean code, and if you're not getting it, red flag.
Well, and real quick, Jeff, to that point, this is a conversation we talked about last week a little bit, and one of the services that you're going to offer on Weblance is actually have people, if you want to speak to that about like basically help out with this. So if you want to talk to that.
Right. So if you're getting code on Weblance, and say it's the first milestone, and it's not going to be a live app yet, it's just going to be raw code, you're really not going to know whether that code's quality or not. It could be tidy, it could be illogic. So one of the things we have is that you can hire a tester at an hourly rate, $10 an hour. Have somebody who can read code look at it, and if it looks good to them or if they have any questions, at least you can follow up with your developer. Couple of things. Number one, you're catching bad code. Second thing, the developer knows after the first submittal that you're paying attention, and they're going to put the extra effort in because it's being monitored. So that's a cool feature that we've added in our marketplace, and I'll add that the other marketplaces don't do that. So, yep, thank you for that.
It's so much like taking your car to a mechanic and absolutely having no idea what the mechanic is doing. You may pull into a shop that they're looking at creating some extra money through the ignorance that you just don't know what you don't know. So it's great information is try to find out and learn as much as possible, not just about the marketing, but even about the coding, so that you know at least from a project management point of view what's going on, and you can actually manage it properly. That's some great information, guys.
And I think real quick on the end, I think it's also important to know that it can save you a lot of money too. I mean, I looking back in the last 5 or 6 months, I spent like $800 or $900 on developers installing RevMob for me, and I look at that now and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! I mean, it's literally 3 lines of code into my Xcode project, and I was paying guys a ton of money to do this, and now it's like the idea of doing that, I'm like, you got to be like, what was I doing? But it is very important for the project management, but it's also there's a lot of things that everyone out there can do themselves. Like the software and the programs is not a lot of the heavy lifting can get done by developers, but a lot of these SDKs are not as difficult as everyone thinks they are, and you spend a couple of weeks learning it. You're going to save yourself a lot of money.
Right on. Well, that's some great tight information, and we're going to expand on it more and more as as these podcasts go, and through AppClover.com or through even your site at Blue Cloud Solutions, Carter, and yours, Jeff, at Weblance. So let's sort of move along, and Matt, let's go to you here a little bit and get a 30,000-foot view of the app landscape. What are you seeing? How it started, how it's changing, what it currently looks like, that type of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is a subject. It's fascinating, right? Anyone that's involved right now in app creation, development, or just paying attention to what's going on. It's just absolutely fascinating to see how quickly it's moving. We always laugh because we have this phrase. We always say it's moving like a juggernaut freight train, because it is, man. It's and there's just no way to stop it, and it's offering bigger opportunities, than the internet, than the boom of the internet, right? I mean, that's the reality when you're looking at the numbers now. As far as the days of, and I can't remember, someone said this and it made me laugh, and it's one of these things I repeat all the time, is throwing a crappy app up on Monday and shopping for your Ferrari on Friday. Those days aren't necessarily going on anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's some cases here and there, and people get attracted by the sexy deals like the draw something or any of those big ones, Instagram. Those are big deals, but those are the home run deals that there's so much more to those stories, and there's so many. Yeah. So much time and effort and money dumped into the back end of those stories that you don't hear about. So I think it's important to, number one, talk about what's actually going on out there. So it's not you're not looking at the sugar-coated view of it. And then number two is to really examine the opportunity. Because, I mean, the reality is it still is a big opportunity. I wrote recently about this. It was in our first issue of the magazine, as well as something that I recently went through was I starting to get involved in the app market and starting to really look and see what was going out there. Len and I did a gross amount of research, just a gross amount, and so I got to see it in person of what's really going on globally on a recent trip. I went to Africa, and while I was there, one of the things I was, in the back of my head, it was just kind of seeded. I went there on a totally different, unrelated trip. Had nothing to do with the app market or anything. It was a client I used to work for. They built a school, so it was the opening of the school there. So it was a really cool trip, right? It was big and powerful on a lot of levels. But one of the things that stood out was the fact that everyone is on a mobile phone there, and this is a third world country, and this has allowed people to change their lives dramatically in better their lives in so many ways because of apps. And I mean, so you look at the fact that not only are app developers changing, the world. I mean, literally, they're changing the lifestyles of a lot of people and the betterment of a lot of people. But also, the opportunity for us as developers and stuff is a lot bigger than I think we're wrapping our head around, because we don't necessarily have that abundance mentality.
Yeah,
So,
Matt, I gotta add to that. You brought up a good point about how it's changing the world. I spent a lot of times in the Philippines, also a third world country. I've seen hospitals where there's 3 women to a bed. They've just given birth. They've got no money for formula, nothing, and every single one of them are nursing and are on their cell phone texting. And it is amazing to me that they don't have formula to feed their newborn baby, but they have enough load in their phone to send out text messages.
Yeah, and it is incredible. I mean, that's one of the things that, as happens with every single technology, as it progresses, it gets cheaper and smaller and easier to create and everything. So the cell phones aren't, if you look at India 10, 15 years ago, they were, $400 for the entry-level cell phone, but at the same time, or mobile phone at the same time, if you look at like Bangladesh, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think that surpassed the yearly salaries or the yearly income. Yeah. So there's no way of doing it now. They're disposable for the most part, right? And you're looking at, and I'll bring it back to Africa. Like the thing that I really look at is, one of the examples is mobile banking, right? Having an app on your phone where you can do mobile banking, and you no longer need to leave your job and walk days and days and days to go to the bank and deposit your money, where in transit you could be robbed, you can be because it is a poor country still, right? There's still things like that happening here and there. But now you're not away from your family. You're able to produce more. You're able to make more money. You're able to live a simpler lifestyle. It's little things like that. But I don't want to get too far off track, because I can talk for hours on this. But I think if anyone wants to spend a couple minutes looking at number one, like Carter, for instance, from you've been involved, now for quite a few months, what it looked like prior to getting involved, or what your thought of it was, versus where you see it now, and more importantly, where you think it's heading. Like, in your opinion, where do you think things are going? What's the next big thing on the horizon, or whatever? Yeah. So we can talk to that for a couple minutes.
Well, I will say, so I'll give you a kind of a unique perspective on this in terms of like the app store in general. The app market is growing like crazy. Yeah, the amount of people contacting me is through the roof. But what I see, which is very interesting, is what Apple is doing to change the app market and the app store. And what I mean by that is like the approval process, the strictness of getting an app into the store, the kind of apps that they are, essentially getting rid of in the app store, and what's going to happen over. A year ago, you can put in almost anything that wasn't, NC17 rated, and if it had some semblance of a functionality, it would be in the App Store, and it would probably get some downloads. Now it's like, I get more apps rejected than I do approved, because it's like, they're like, this isn't providing a good enough experience. We require that you have to have a restore button in your in-app purchases, and there's unloading all these new restrictions, which is, I understand it. It's just like, I think that in the next 6 months, it's not going to be as easy to get an app in the store as it was. And that's that's a barrier that has never really been there before. It's never been a question of can I get in this store? It's always been like, is this a good idea? And now I think it's going to be like, are they even going to let this in? And that's something that's definitely needs to be on the radar for some people.
And you don't know until after you develop the app, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I think though, the reality of that is we're going to see a better user experiences, from the apps that you're downloading, and it's going to improve the market. It's going to elevate the market, right?
Yeah, it absolutely will. I think it's going to be like, if you know what you're doing and you've done your research and you developed a good app, it's going to be an awesome business to be in. And cool. I think that like understanding this stuff and like understanding how it works and like reading a lot of information and knowing what you're getting yourself into, awesome situation to be in.
Cool.
But the guys who are just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna whip up something and let it rip, like, get real.
I'm gonna make another fart app.
Yeah. Well, and it goes from what hobby to business. So you go from instead of just putting an app together and throwing it on just to see what it does, it entails more of a business mind and entrepreneurial mind behind it, where you actually need to do some strategy planning. And even strategy planning to the point of doing, the marketing planning before you actually create and launch your app. You have to know is the market. You touched already on marketing and market analysis. You need to know this information. So I think, as Matt was saying at the start, sort of, the days are leaving where you don't need to know knowledge. I still say right now you can still be very sloppy and successful, but it's getting less and less, where as the competition grows in this app store, you're going to find, I think it's my prediction, you're going to find that you need to know your marketing better, you need to be more of a serious person in business, and you need to take it more seriously rather than a hobby, so that you do learn along the way. And it's going to get tighter and tighter. I mean, the competition is definitely going to bring with it a lot of new opportunities for learning for people. That's for sure.
And I think the other part of that too, which is kind of cool, is we're seeing it. And this is a little unrelated, but it's still about the industry as a whole, is we're seeing how small our world's getting, right? I mean, you look at on this call right now, we've got 3 countries covered. Carter and I are in the U.S., in various states in the U.S., Len's in Canada, and Jeff, you're in the Philippines, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, look at, it's just all these things, and besides the fact that, technology is getting smaller, or cheaper and more accessible for people and everything, and how connected and interconnected our world's getting, it's going to invite a lot of new developers and a lot of new talent to the market, and the ability to not just work for other people, but the ability to get involved and to actually be, I don't want to say competition, but you know what I mean, like to be a peer, whereas before you would have been. So I think that's opening up a whole new, like, thinking about what's happening on the horizon, where we're heading. I think that's going to become a huge factor, which is another reason why it's great and why it's important to get involved now, and to really take it seriously now, because it's just like, fast forward, from the start of the internet to now, you can put a website up and no one's going to know it exists. I always use that analogy, like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it actually make a sound? Well, it's kind of the same thing with websites. Now, if you build one, who cares? Like, you have to do all the work, and you have to really know what you're doing to get it noticed. Same thing is going to happen with the apps, and it's happening. It's going to happen exponentially faster as we move forward in time. So you really are going to have to know what you're doing, and so get involved now is my point. Like,
and I think Matt, what Carter was saying before about social integration, I think that's going to have a lot to play with in the next while as well. Is how much can you integrate your app, into a social integration with Facebook or with other social media, so that it can be shared and you can actually take advantage of those things that are still out there now that can actually spread virally. Because people they share their interests, they share their likes. So if you can get some sort of app that's very captivating for people's attention, it works very well with social media. But again, you have to learn how to do that. It's not just like, what I said before, do social media.
Yeah.
All of these things have to be learned talents that you continually, it's a learning curve, but as you go, test, tweak, repeat, test, tweak, repeat, and you can actually gain a lot that way.
And to that point, this is one of the things we're providing by this AppCast, by our site, by both Carter and Jeff's sites, is mentorship, right? Like, learn from other people, learn what the successful people are doing out there, and emulate it, and like seek out that knowledge, because it's going to make you that much more successful, that much more quicker. That's not grammatically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's another thing that, you know, a little, I guess, a segue piece of advice. You know, like that's what you need to know, and you need to know what's going on out there too. So I want to shift gears slightly just to kind of keep things moving along, and because, you know, again, how quick this industry is and everything. It's important to know what's going on and what's topical and, you know, what's happening today. So one of the things we're going to do in these podcasts is we're, you know, in each one we're going to bring to you kind of like a handful of headlines of things that are happening that week, and just to kind of let people know and just kind of do a little news segment. So with that, I'll let Jeff, I'll let you take over and kind of tag in here.
Yeah, and it's kind of good because we've been talking a lot about viral marketing, and there's a new piece of legislation right now in the House that could seriously limit our users to leverage, you know, viral marketing. We have a bill in Congress called the Commercial Felony Streaming Act, and it makes unauthorized web streaming of copyrighted content. And it doesn't matter if it's music, sound, or a video, some kid playing a shoot-up video that he uploads to the internet, that if you are to upload that you could go to jail for 5 years in prison. So here's basically what can happen. You're filming your kid and they're dancing in front of the TV, or you've got a barbecue in the backyard and there's music playing, or, you know, like I said, kids playing, he did a great headshot and he wanted to upload the video to the internet. All eligible to put you in jail for 5 years. So for, you know, as appreneurs, that's a big thing, because if you're putting apps out that are games or any other kind of thing, YouTube right now is one of the hottest ways for viral marketing. So that's something that we want to pay attention to. Right now, there's 43 organizations that are lobbying for this. There's only 3 that are against. Demand Progress is probably the best one. There is a link on weblance.com for it. They have a lot more information about it, so it's just something to keep an eye out.
I'll be curious to see how this plays out, because it's one of those things where, on, you know, at every instance or at every opportunity, whatever, there's always a flip side, right? Like, this seems like it's a bad thing, and it is going to make it a little more difficult. Like, you know, for app developers like Carter, one of your apps, like you're more than happy if people want to do a review and do a screencast review of it and put it up on YouTube, and like, you don't want anything to happen. Like, that's helping your cause, right? You look at how many sites are dedicated to Angry Birds. Do you think they care? No, they encourage it. Right? And so while it'll present some more hurdles and stuff, I think if this goes through, granted, you know, I mean, obviously it's looking like this is where it's heading, but I'll be curious to see how it plays out. Number one is how they're going to enforce it, who's going to enforce it, what kind of effort's going to be put against it. And number two is, will this actually improve communications or whatever, or relationships between app developers and their fans? You know, like, because people will have to get permission in order to do this. And while it's a pain, because, you know, you think about the Angry Birds guy, you know, 200 people a day want to post a video. That's a lot of emails to say yes to, you know, if they're all asking for permission and stuff. So, I mean, it's really curious to see what's going to happen. It's something
this is about the 6th piece of legislation that's been reformatted, and it's probably the most watered down one, because fortunately the other ones did fail. But I think that, you know, railing against this sort of this regulation of the internet's important for appreneurs, because it can, I think, snowball if we let them start doing that. But all right, so the next story that we have here, there's some new developer policy rules for the Google Play, and this has come as a result of probably 25 press releases that were done, that were released by sort of small blogs over the internet, but had these huge marketing campaigns, I smell Apple, about sort of malware and piracy and all this kind of stuff. So Google had to respond to it. They did update their privacy rules. Keep an eye on that. Go have a look at it. It could affect your next app. And let's see here. Facebook has opened up their App Center to the world finally. So go check that out. Learn about how it works, what's possible, what you can do there. Maybe there's some integration opportunities with your mobile app, and you could be, you know, first off the starting line. So
yeah, and I would jump in there, Jeff, and say that, you know, you're right on with the idea that just checking out communities like that, checking out marketplaces like that. That's some of the best places that I have gotten ideas for building games. And not only that, you'd be amazed, especially using a service like Weblands or any of these, where you could go to a developer and show them a link to a Facebook app or a Facebook game and be like, hey, what's it going to take to build something just like this? And they can look at that and give you a very clear price and cut out 3 weeks worth of, well, what happens on this screen, what happens on this screen type of stuff. And, those type of idea engines are awesome for, appreneurs and what we're doing, all that stuff. So that's definitely a really good resource to check out.
Right. And the final story is Doom has been released for the Windows device. Now, this is not a huge story, but it did occur to me, because we are going to interview Carter today, that these devices are becoming more powerful and we're able to put sort of these big box games into our phones. Are those games going to steal market share from what essentially right now is small business appreneurs? Carter, do you see that as possibly a threat?
I don't know. I think that it's. I understand what you're saying. I think it's a little bit of apples and oranges in certain ways.
Because they're different types of games, really.
Yeah, and it's just like there's so much brand loyalty to the the platforms and the devices and things like that it's. I don't see a whole lot of like switchover in terms of I think you might get people who might play it on both, but I don't know if you're going to someone who's going to say I was going to play it here, but now I'm playing it here.
Yeah.
It might be more of an and less of an or.
Because Doom on an iPhone, let's face it, it sucks. It's not like totally. Playing it on your TV. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.